Welcome to Social Constructivism, Culture and Experience. Before we get started, there's a couple of definitions that we'd like to review. First and foremost, let's understand what we mean by language. When looking at the Oxford Dictionary, the definition of language is as follows. One, it's the method of human communication, either spoken or written, consisting of the use of words in a structured and conventional way. Language can also be seen as the system of communication used by a particular community or country. Last but not least, language can also be defined as the phraseology and vocabulary of a certain profession, domain, or group of people. In the context of learning, language plays a huge role, not just in terms of the language that is spoken by the members of the class, in this case the community, but more importantly, it is the agreed upon language that is used in the community, in the classroom, in the environment in which learning happens. So understanding that language is more than just your background or your ethnicity or any kind of background that you have, blah, 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 blah. In addition to understanding how we define language, we also need to understand how do we define culture, especially when we start to consider that culture plays a role in the social constructivist classroom. When we look at the Oxford Dictionary's definition of culture, culture can be seen as the customs, the art, the social institutions, and achievements of a particular nation, people, or other social group. In addition, the Oxford Dictionary also points to culture being the attitudes and behaviors as well as the characteristics of a particular social group. Again, this can include language, rituals, customs, relationships, values, expected behaviors and practices, and in some cases even the thoughts and the ways in which people interact. All of these things are defined by culture. This is important to understand because when we consider that a community can be a classroom, well, a community can have a culture, and that culture is defined by the agreed upon norms, values, thoughts, rituals, and relationships that exist within the classroom that are negotiated between the instructor as well as the learners. So culture also plays a role in terms of the social constructivist environment. So when we combine language and culture together and look at it from the lens of social constructivism, we know that Vygotsky emphasizes that the role of language and culture is important when it comes to cognitive development. In addition, Vygotsky also noted that language and culture play an essential role in both human intellectual development and in how humans perceive the world. Again, the points of view that are formed by people, many of those points of view can be formed based on the experiences, the language, the culture in which that person or individual is brought up. More importantly, that culture and language informs the learner when they now work in a classroom or cohort environment and begin to form the culture, the community that that classroom embodies. So with that, we need to look at language and culture as frameworks through which humans experience, communicate, and understand reality. This becomes even more critical when we begin to realize that language and culture play a role in our experiences and in our human intellectual development, which means that at the end of the day, language and the overall schemes that we form, conceptual or otherwise, in essence, are really seen as social phenomena. Because they are seen as social phenomena, we must also begin to look at these human cognitive structures as being socially constructed. Again, language, culture, these are items that are negotiated and understood within a given community. So therefore, the only way that can happen is in a social context. Therefore, when we look at language and culture, we must always realize that we form language and culture in the social context and never in isolation. For example, if we begin to look at learning and experiences in general, we must understand that social interactions and cultural influences will have a huge effect on students and how learning occurs. Again, the culture is made up of a variety of different beliefs, attitudes, and these items, again, influence not only how the student learns, but in how they interact with others. In addition to looking at the social interactions, we need to look at the learner as a social actor. The social actor, in essence, invents concepts, models, and schemes that make sense of their lived experiences. This is critical to understand because, again, we make meaning and understanding based on our experiences in a social context. So if you have students in a classroom who are interacting with each other and they're bringing their experiences, their background, their culture to bear when it comes to learning process, again, each learner is going to be at different levels of development and understanding, so they're going to form their own mental concepts and models and schemes to help them make sense of what they are learning. Last but not least, in doing so in a social context, they work with others, they modify and negotiate on these social constructions, and in essence, in light of the new experience, potentially can change their mind and develop new ideas and concepts and schemes when it comes to their own experiences. So at the end of the day, learning happens in relation to the social interactions, the cultural and language components that a learner brings with them, and in the social negotiations that happen that help them in the construction of meaning and language. So for example, when we look at a specific classroom, we must consider, therefore, that when it comes to the culture of the classroom, when it comes to the experiences of each individual that are brought to bear into the learning activities that are formed, when we bring in the language of this culture and bring in the language and experiences and ideas that they each bring in their profession and their experiences, all of this informs learning where meaning is co-constructed. So again, learning is seen as a social activity where your background, your culture, your experiences, your language play a role in helping you not only to develop understanding, but also it helps you as you collectively begin to negotiate meaning and understanding and drive towards a co-constructed understanding of the world. That's it for now. Go on to the next part of our theme park where you can learn more about social constructivism and the concepts created by Lev Vygotsky. Thanks again for joining this presentation.